guys, so today I am going to make a bunch of sourdough breads. It might actually be over the next couple days, but I'm going to start out with some hamburger buns. So I need to get this going. Sometimes I'll start it first thing in the morning before I even do much of anything, just get the sourdough going. So I have the sourdough starter all ready to go. I think it's pretty hungry at this point actually. I fed it last night. It's about 2 years old. Can you see all the bubbles there? It's very happy. It smells very yeasty. So let's get going on our hamburger buns. The day before I bake anything with sourdough, I pull out my starter from the fridge. This is a dry starter, so it's not one where I'm always having to feed and discard all the time. And this particular day, I just decided to go ahead and do the whole container. Usually I just take out a tablespoon at a time, and then I will use that until I have about a tablespoon left, and then I'll feed it, refresh it, and then put it back in the fridge so I have another full container. But I was just redoing the whole thing today. So then I just added some water, and I just tried to dissolve the starter in the water. And since it was cold from the fridge, I added some lukewarm water just to help wake it up, help warm it up. Then I personally choose to use white flour and just add it in little bits at a time, or a cup at a time, whatever. I knew I was going to need a good bit of starter on this day, so that's why there's a good amount there. And then you just mix it up and until you're happy with the consistency. This is kind of what I was looking for. So then after that, I just put a lid on it to keep the flies out, keep bugs out, because they love the smell of it. And then I put it to the side in a fairly warm place, or just, on the counter, so then it can sit there for about 6 hours or so. In hindsight, I should have probably fed it twice, as you'll find out later in the video. And sometimes I just eyeball it, the amount that I need for a recipe, but this day I was like, let's go ahead and just measure it out. And I made sure to leave some in the container because I hadn't pulled any out just yet to put back in the fridge. So then I would take this and I would feed this portion that's left and then put it back in the fridge. I've made the mistake, I've done it at least once, where I went to refresh my starter and I forgot to put some in the fridge, and I didn't realize until I was washing the dishes, and thankfully I was able to scrape off, literally just scrape out of maybe it was a measuring cup or something, remnants of the sourdough starter, and I was praying that it would work, and it did. I was able to keep it going. So I started it when we were newly married, and so I really didn't want to have to start it all over again. There I was just using some almond milk. There I'm adding just some softened butter. I don't know, growing up, we didn't keep butter on the counter, but I was kind of surprised that some people do, and so I've actually started doing it, and it's really handy when you need it for a recipe. It's already softened and ready to go. When it comes to the Vital Wheat gluten, I actually buy this in a large bag, 3 to 5 pound bag. It's cheaper that way, and I'll then just refill the little container as needed. If I haven't already mentioned, this is a recipe that's on plan with Trim Your Healthy Mama. So it works out. There's not a ton of honey in it, so that means that by the time you divide the hamburger buns up, it's a minuscule amount. So for those of you that are wondering about the honey in that, then you just go ahead and mix it and mix it and mix it some more. Slowly add in your flour. I did a mix with this one. I did partial, I believe I did white flour and whole wheat flour. Now, I know this is not technically on plan, so this will be something my family will eat. I might eat some of it, we'll see. But just, if you used whole wheat flour, it would be 100% on plan, or einkorn or kamut or something like that. Then, there you see me just feeding the last of that before I forgot. Feeding that and kind of getting it revived again, and then setting it aside. Now, before I forget, I went ahead and put some of my starter that I just fed into a little jar. Now this goes into the fridge, and it can sit for however long until I need it. So next time I bake, I'm gonna pull this out and feed it, and probably take a tablespoon out and feed it and get it going. But in the meantime, this just goes into the fridge, and it should be good there. At this point, it was mixed up pretty good, and I just needed to add the rest of the flour that the recipe called for. So I just did it little bits at a time and added it until it was the consistency that I was looking for. One thing that's kind of fun, this KitchenAid was a gift from a family for my husband and I at our wedding, and I gotta tell you, every time I use it, I think of them. So I don't know, it's just one of those things we're really grateful for, because, you know, once you're married, newlyweds, you don't necessarily have a ton of money, and so to have something like this to be able to use is definitely a huge gift.
Alright, so now I have about 20 minutes while that just rests. And so in the meantime, I'm going to make a new milkshake that they just posted on the THM Facebook page or on Instagram. It's a pumpkin pie shake. It doesn't have any carbs or fat, so it's called a fuel pull. But because I am nursing, I'm probably going to have something else with it so I can have some carbs, just because that's really good for milk supply. So let's go ahead and make that while the hamburger buns are resting. This is sunflower lecithin. This is also just good for a nursing mama. That's for a 4th teaspoon of glucomannan. That's a bit of a thickener. Helps stabilize blood sugar, that kind of thing. Now, I gotta crack this one open. Just plain pumpkin. One and two. Now this, I'm gonna put this away. Probably put it in a little container, maybe freeze some of it, use some of it for other things. And using stevia, my favorite sweetener. I'm doing a couple donks of that. There. Heaping donks. Some pumpkin pie spice. I'm not sure if I made this or bought this, but you can, it's fairly easy to make. 4 teaspoons of that. I'm gonna use just some water. You like my little things? I got these at an auction, a whole set of these. They're actually for dry goods, really, but I just used it for liquid today. Okay, now I'm gonna blend this, and then we will add the protein powder. If you add the protein powder too early, it gets really, really fluffy. Nice and fluffy, more than I want. And now we're doing the protein powder. It's about 2 tablespoons there. Now the last thing that's kind of fun are chocolate chips. These are Bake Believe chocolate chips. So I'm gonna use just a handful of these. I don't want to blend them up too much, just a little bit. Just like that. Actually, maybe a little more. And then this. Then we'll just blend it for a couple seconds. There we go. How yummy does that look?
I ended up having to make a run to town for an appointment, and so I threw that in the fridge when I made it, and then I pulled it out when I went to leave, and it was the perfect thing. I really like being able to grab a shake to take that when I'm heading to town. They always say, don't go to town hungry. And so this was great for that. Then after the dough had rested for about 20 minutes, then I went ahead and added the salt, and then you set it to knead for about, I want to say it was 7 to 8 minutes. Like I said, the recipe will be in the description, so you can double check that. But I let it go for a while there. I maybe should have added a little bit more flour, but it was kind of tacky, and it worked out okay, as you'll see. For the resting period now, I put it in a greased metal bowl. I know some people are super sticklers about not using metal tools or bowls, that kind of thing with sourdough, but I haven't seemed to notice that it makes much of a difference for me. So I just wanted something that had a lid so that it wouldn't develop a skin on it just from it being too dry in the air, since we live in the desert here. It was, I would say, a little difficult getting it out of the bowl. It's kind of sticking there. And then once that had sat for its appointed time, it rose a good bit. I had it sitting in a warm part of the house. Then I pulled it out. Look at how soft it is. It felt really nice to handle. And then I went and rolled them into little buns. It was kind of funny. I just thought I would just go with it. And then after a little bit, you'll notice it's kind of sticky. So I ended up putting some oil on my hands, and that definitely, I should have done that sooner. It made the process way easier. You kind of just do it into little 3-ounce size buns or so, which of course you could weigh it, pull out a scale and weigh it, but then I used some saran wrap and I put some oil on it just so that when the buns would rise, they wouldn't stick. You would think I would have remembered this for later in the video. You'll see I kind of messed up further on, but anyways, it kept the buns, once they rose, it kept them from sticking to the saran wrap. So when I went to take it off, nothing catastrophic happened or whatever. Once they had risen for a couple hours, then I got the oven ready while I went ahead and did the egg wash on the top. Just mixed it up, and then I took a little brush, carefully had to remove the saran wrap, and then took the little silicone brush and brushed it on. I remember when we got, I think it was in some auction things, we got those little glass ramekin, they're little bowls, and I felt so much like a real chef or something, because growing up my sister liked to watch cooking videos, and so they would always use those for their ingredients, so I was like, oh, I felt so important once I found those. It's kind of funny. And look at the bubbles on some of those. Did you see that? They're pretty nice and big. But at the very end, once the hamburger buns are done, I like to, with maybe the last couple minutes left, I turn the broiler on just so they get a bit of a brown top, because otherwise they tend to look kind of pale. So they would look like that, I guess. So I kind of like to give them a little bit of a brown top. And these I left in a little bit too long, as you can see, but they still tasted great. Now it's time for the honey oat bread. This bread is one that we like to use for toast, for sandwiches, and it's awesome. Really awesome bread. I like to make a big batch when I do make it, and then we can freeze it and pull it out as we need it. But this particular day, I just made two loaves. And the recipe will be in the description for this as well. The honey my honey is crystallizing on me, which I'm not exactly used to here. I guess we don't use honey a ton, so we don't go through it very often, but there you can see me adding some sunflower lecithin. I don't have it marked because that's another thing I kind of buy. I think I buy a pound of it at a time, and then we just refill a container. Saves a little bit of money that way. And then my oat flour. Hey, it's really one way to do oat flour is just to throw it into your blender. It's much cheaper than buying like ground oats or oat flour, so it's kind of there's a little hack for you. Then I just went and mixed it all up and slowly added some whole wheat flour. For this recipe, I just used whole wheat flour and einkorn flour. Kind of did a mix of that. And in hindsight, I hadn't thought about how einkorn flour doesn't have much gluten, which is awesome if you're gluten intolerant. But when you're making bread, you have to account for that. And so this particular recipe didn't turn out quite like I was hoping. And I had a third recipe for sourdough, a third one for artisan bread, which I actually did not end up including in this video just because it did not turn out at all. It was pretty flat. Basically, it ate up all the sugars way too fast. So typically, for these recipes to be on plan, they need to ferment for 6 to 7 hours, but mine didn't need as long to ferment. And as a result, I should have put them in the oven a whole lot sooner than what I ended up doing. And so they didn't have the rise like they were supposed to. I also did not need to knead this quite as long. So, yeah, you live and learn, I guess, don't you? Then added some pink Himalayan salt. I think I had used up the white salt at this point, so I restocked with the pink stuff from Costco. And then I just mixed it up. And like I said, I shouldn't have let it go quite as long as I did. But it was pretty nice at this point, nice and soft, and it was looking great. So for those of you homemakers or anybody who happens to have a kitchen, are there things that you snagged or you collected that maybe belong to your mom or relatives? I will say these measuring spoons, my mom has a set of them, and before I was married, I came across some of them, and I snagged them as soon as I got them because I was like, I want those in my home. So it's really fun to use them because I know my mom got them from Nana and then her mom, and so then for me to have a similar pairs, I think it's kind of cool. So let me know, is there stuff that you have that you've gotten from past generations that you like to use either in the kitchen or just in the house? Typically when I make a big batch, I'll use this Tupperware container to let it rise in, and I obviously didn't need a container quite as big, but it ended up working out okay. I just greased the container and then put it in a warm spot to let it rise. Now, I probably could have left it on the counter where somewhere where there was AC and stuff, but there you can see the window panes. It kind of breaks fairly easy. I should have gotten a bit of a heads up about what was going to happen here. Anyhow, after this I put it to the side and let it rise for what? I think it was 4 hours? 5 hours? You'll have to look at the recipe. And then, this is my favorite bread pan. It works for 2. My mom actually has a set of 3 of these. She got them. I think they were from my dad's grandma or something. I could be wrong. But they're kind of a vintage piece. And so I wanted, when I got married, I was like, I want one of those bread pans. Maybe at some point I'll have to get more when we have a larger family. But for now, this works great for us. You can see the dough there is pretty floppy. Has a lot of slack to it. So then this sat for like 2 hours to rise, and the one mistake I did was I forgot to put oil on the saran wrap. So then when it rose up to the saran wrap, and when I took the saran wrap off, there was no way to get it off without it sticking, which was rather unfortunate. That just went in the oven for however long the recipe says. I don't remember how long it was. And once again, I turned the broiler on just to get a bit of a brown top to it. I was rather disappointed. I almost didn't use the footage, but then I was like, nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. And when I actually went to use the bread, it wasn't as bad as I was expecting. It wasn't crumbly. It actually turned out pretty decent. It's not like I was hoping for or used to, but it was acceptable. So we'll use it for toasts and sandwiches, and it's nice to have a good unplanned bread, homemade loaf of bread. This next recipe is a fun one. Sourdough monster cookies, and I went and turned it into squares. So here you can see me refreshing my starter. This starter hadn't been used in a good number of months, so there was a little bit of hooch, which I poured off, the black hooch. But just went ahead and added water again to it like normal, mixed it up, and then just started adding some flour. And then once that was all mixed up, I set it aside and let it eat, the sugars and feed itself. I actually found this recipe from a gal on Instagram. She created this recipe, and I will link it in the description below. I'll link her recipe. I liked this one because it's really good for when you're nursing. Just like any crossover is, the combination of carbs and fats is good for milk supply. Sorry, I know I'm always talking about that on this channel, but it's the reality of where I'm at right now. Since it has lots of oats, that's also really good. Generally, anything with oats is phenomenal for helping with good milk supply, which I'm so blessed I haven't had an issue with, and I'm pretty sure it's due to my diet and stuff. Really thankful for THM, how it's helped with Trimalchi Mama, for how it's helped with that. Then I just added my starter to it. It was kind of an interesting combination because I've never done like a sweet dessert with starter, so it was kind of a fun one to do. It definitely tasted amazing, as you can probably imagine, the sweetness of everything. I think her recipe called for brown sugar, unplanned brown sugar, something that wasn't your traditional brown sugar, but I didn't have that, so I just used, I believe, Super Sweet, which is a THM sweetener, a natural sweetener, and then I used some molasses for the brown sugar effect, just a little bit of molasses. And as you can imagine, it was definitely tasty. I had it with some of Coach Becky's ice cream, and that was an amazing combination. Really delicious. Once again, I want to thank you for hanging out with me. If there's recipes or things you'd be curious to see, let me know in the comments below. I'm still kind of figuring out this YouTube thing, and I really enjoy working on the videos and sharing stuff, so would love to hear if there's things that you would be interested in seeing. Thanks for hanging out. Bye.